Okay, so The Strangers, Chapter 1, caused me to exercise a lot of restraint and self-discipline because right off the bat, it tells us that this is a very different movie than the original. The 2008 film is my favorite horror movie of all time. Now, this reboot does add some things to the story, but I feel like it takes away some things that made the original special. Now, whenever we watch a reboot, we can't go into it expecting a shot-for-shot remake, and we can't go into it expecting to feel the same emotions we felt when we watched the first one. Any remake or reboot should retain the essence of the original film while adding a new spin, a new take, a new angle to the story to separate it from the original. So first, let me get the negatives out the way because I don't think there are that many. But the first 15 minutes of this movie is incredibly hard for me to watch, but that's mostly because I love the 2008 version so much, and the first 5 minutes of that incredibly good. Because when the 2008 film starts, you barely get any dialogue. You're in the car with the characters, and then you go straight to the cabin, and based on body language, based on how the scene is, based on everything you're visually engaging with, you understand these characters, you understand their dynamic with each other, you understand what their state of mind is going into this cabin, and there's tension already building up before any of the creepiness happens because there's this intense tension between the characters, all without saying anything. You have all the setup you need without having to say a word. It's very well done. This film begins the exact opposite. You get a ton of unnecessary exposition, and you have these extra steps to get them to the cabin that feels forced and also unnecessary. So that part I didn't like, and the other part I didn't like about The Strangers Chapter 1 is the reliance on jump scares. Because again, one thing that made the original special is the fact that there wasn't this over-reliance on jump scares. There was a lot of like slow, creepy scares that kind of organically crept into the scene. Like being in the theater when this scene happened and watching people's reaction to noticing that man in the background was incredibly creepy, and it was more effective than any jump scare. And it played on everybody's natural feeling and natural fear of being in an old house and feeling like there's somebody there. Like that's a very natural and universally shared fear that this scene was playing off of, and that movie had a lot of scenes like that. The new movie didn't really play like that. It was a lot more traditional horror where it was a lot of jump scares. It was a lot of shadows moving across the screen. And I felt like that took away from the character and the specialness that set The Strangers apart from other horror films. Now, aside from those two things, which sound like big things, but aside from those two aspects, the movie was entertaining. Once we actually got to the cabin and things actually started happening, they were able to do things differently and take a different approach to the home invasion aspect of it while still being able to build tension properly. The whole time it was like a build and release. It felt like you were being choked almost to the point of passing out and then release. The tension would build up, and then decompress. They would apply pressure and then release it. Then they would apply more pressure and then release it. And there was this ebb and flow that kept building and intensifying throughout the entire film. When those moments were happening, all the stuff I was complaining about, I wasn't thinking about anymore. And so if a scary movie does the scares right, then all the other stuff we can forgive. But it still is a horror movie, and so people in horror movies are going to do dumb things. The thing I will say about these characters is that it wasn't overly stupid, in my opinion. Like, they were doing some stuff that I personally wouldn't do, and you as a viewer are like, why would you do that? But to me, it made sense for those characters, and it wasn't outside the realm of reasonability. Like some other movies will have you feeling like there's nobody on the planet who's gotten to be an adult that's this dumb. Like I never had that moment in the movie. And of course the main distinction between this movie and the original is that this one is set up to be part one of a trilogy. And you can tell by watching, and the director and the producer pretty much said as much, that they did not want to remake this movie. They needed to remake one in order for it to make sense. They needed to retell the original story for what they wanted to build on it to make sense. And without going into spoilers, is really just the idea of continuing this story without, you couldn't have done that with the original. If you just made a sequel to the original and built off of that, it wouldn't have made sense by just going off the 2008 movie. So you kind of had to remake this one in order to make 2 and 3. So I get it. But as with all things, the most important thing is the debate and the discussion. So tell me what you think. What do you think? Have you ever seen the original The Strangers from 2008? How do you feel about that movie? And are you intrigued, or have you seen the new Strangers Chapter 1? And how do you feel about it? Let me know and we can get into it, and I'll catch you guys next time.